Gambling series are a very believable and underappreciated way of delving into the human psyche, managing to show the most undesirable qualities of a soul in exaggerated yet very believable ways with its antagonists. Whether it's Golden Kamui, Jojo or Bakano to name a few, I'm a big fan of unhinged villains, and series like Akagi and Kaiji have always managed to do them the best, giving us far more than just some superficial crazy antagonist, as these games can essentially be used as a case study of the villains due to how the gamble and their mental state intertwine, showing us the characters' highs, lows and everything in between. Gambles always show humanity at its rawest, so with this video I'm going to talk about why I love this kind of antagonist so much. There's a lot of elements to gambling in these series, but one of the most important is definitely to be able to read your opponent, be able to understand what kind of person they are. This means that mentally unstable characters will be tricky to get a grasp of, as they could be hiding their true nature or go between such emotional extremes you can't get an idea of their true self. It makes sense as to why these people are so deep into gambling due to the addiction and rush you get from it corrupting you, which we'll get into later, and there's also a few studies linking those with gambling addictions with antisocial, histrionic and narcissistic personality disorders to name a few, which probably brings a few characters to mind for you. These kinds of people are the most interesting and most fitting to gamble against as stakes increase as we near the end game of the story, and in most series also work well as a foil to our protagonist. Halfway through Usogi, there's a rich psychopath using his father's money to kill people in a twisted gambling game, while his opponent Kaji is shocked at his bloodlust and takes a righteous stance against him. Similarly in Kaiji, our MC is a wreck under the mental pressure coming from Hyodo's unwavering belief in his victory due to his gambling experience and ego stemming from his status, while Kaiji has had a whole host of disasters befall him leading up to this game. These differences in philosophy can result in some gripping rivalries as the hatred between the two increases due to how incompatible they are, and also manage to influence the games themselves in interesting ways. Like I said earlier, your gambling skill and personality are interlinked, so having these diametrically opposed characters can result in some fascinating games with wildly different playstyles between the two. When it comes to differing playstyles, Akagi does a fantastic job with this as the main character takes insane risks to grasp at the smallest chance of victory, showing a complete disregard for his own life and shaking up more logical, level-headed opponents. Logic will only get you so far in these types of games however, as luck will always be a huge factor, being a wild card that can ruin any well thought out plan you have. Having the courage to take big risks is what separates the pros from the rookies, but that said, it's important to realise that luck doesn't last forever and to stay level headed, maintaining a balance between the two, though there are some people that get caught up in their own fortune and start developing an unbelievable ego, bringing us back to the idea of how certain types of people gravitate towards these gambles or are perhaps created through playing them. I've spent this video talking pretty broadly about the elements that make up good villains in these series, like how the gambles are inherently linked to certain characteristics and bolster them in a really unique way, but it now seems like a good time to give a specific example. To demonstrate how someone can be corrupted through their luck and turn into a truly despicable villain, as well as one of the best gambling antagonists ever, look no further than Washizu Iwa from Akagi. Washizu is the very definition of self-made, working his way up the police before losing his position at the outbreak of the Second World War, only to reach even greater heights afterwards. He'd take risk after risk and always emerge as if he had the devil's own luck, having such confidence in himself that it was honestly delusional. This warped his perception of himself and others to the point that he essentially saw the masses as subhuman, but despite his abilities there was one thing he couldn't escape from: old age. This man had absolute control over all aspects of his life, with everyone he interacted with bowing down to him, and he was absolutely terrified of losing his empire. No matter your status, you can't escape from death, and our fear of it is something we all have in common, which Washizu learnt harder than most. Upon realising that he's slowly but surely reaching the end of his life, all he could do was lash out at the world around him, setting up a twisted gambling game which kills his opponents. His lunacy reached the point where he despised people for being younger than him simply because they'd outlive him, so he gained a sick sense of satisfaction from snuffing out their life. Ultimately though, this was only a temporary remedy for his despair, and as his fear grew his abilities actually regressed in a sense. For starters, this game of Mahjong he created was very one-sided, with Washizu having very little at stake, so it can hardly be considered a true test of his skills. As well as this, due to his obsession with this killing game of his, he was in a lot of trouble with the police due to the amount of evidence left behind at the crime scene. While his own hubris would be part of the reason he wouldn't worry about being arrested, surely he wouldn't have allowed such simple mistakes or be overzealous with his game in his prime. This fear of his isn't something he's actively aware of all the time, instead being a subconscious influence, which is something we see early on in his game against Akagi. This series is actually a prequel to a manga called 10, meaning the outcome of this gamble is made clear right from the beginning, but it does a good job of keeping a level of intensity throughout. Akagi demonstrates his Mahjong prowess to Washizu early in the game, though the latter's no slouch either. That said, he clearly wasn't expecting a genuine battle, and Akagi's recklessness and goal of outright killing his opponent clearly got to him and made him rush for victory with hastily made hands. From a viewer perspective, it looks like Washizu's luck has won out and he has Akagi in the ropes again and again leading up to this, but in the end it turned out to be a fantastic method of showing the degree that Akagi is able to manipulate his opponent's thought process through his actions. In a lot of series you'll see stuff like how characters can get to know each other through their battles, and it's essentially the same here. By picking up on the subtle changes in playstyle, we could realistically get an idea of what each character is feeling without them saying a word, with the series really excelling at this aspect of the gambling genre. This turns everything we thought we knew about this battle right on its head, with the new goal being to bring out Washizu's full potential, as Akagi wants a proper battle with the man at his peak. He's been impressive already with some phenomenal moments, but the idea that he can get far better than this has us readers just as invested in his growth as our protagonist. Washizu loses his confidence as Akagi racks up wins and finds himself on the verge of death, and his fear of his opponent grows to the point that we're almost rooting for the guy. It's as if the gods have abandoned him, and with this train of thought Washizu remembers his beginnings, how he had nothing on his side and managed to build his empire. He's a man that never needed their protection anyway, reaching the peak of his narcissism as he declares that he's above such gods and they bow down to his supreme luck in the end, being the same as all the businessmen that have sucked up to him in the past. As he surrenders himself to his ego and reaches his most disgusting form in this gamble, it finally feels like we've seen him at his peak. The entire battle they go through is a perfect case study of everything a gambling series brings to the table when developing its antagonists. These larger-than-life characters may be enigmatic at the beginning, but as our protagonist works his way through the gamble, we'll slowly uncover more about them, as well as some surprisingly relatable elements in the midst of their insanity. The truth is that greed, egotism and a feeling of self-importance are something we've all experienced or can all relate to in some level. Part of the reason nostalgia is such a big deal is because of people reminiscing about their prime after all. So despite everything, despite how fucked up he is, Washizu has a very sympathetic side to him as we consider the root of his madness. The gambles are a fantastic way of dissecting their true nature and often are a unique method of giving us development as well as character progression, as all aspects of the series are thematically connected. These characters are conveyed in a really special manner in manga like Kaiji and Usogi, and are surprisingly relatable when you consider the cause of their current personality. No other genre can make me feel such a wide variety of emotions for a character so effortlessly every time, and for this reason I can't help but love gambling villains.